everyone, and welcome back to another one of our CCIR Spotlight interviews. Today I'm here with Karma, who's been looking at some astrophysics within our Future Scholars program. And so I'm going to pass over to her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit more about what she's been working on and her project.
Hello, I am Karma Bridgman. I am Canadian, but I live in Dubai. I'm really interested in engineering and astrophysics, and I'm so glad I've done this Global Future Scholars program, which was the main title is Astrophysics, the Astrophysics of High Density Objects. So objects like, for example, black holes or supernova.
Wonderful. So then let's start from the very beginning, I guess. How did you hear about this program, or what inspired you to take part in this particular program?
The main thing that inspired me to sort of find a program like this is that I'd never really researched much at school. I'd done some independent research on astrophysics before regarding dark matter, but I'd never written an actual report on it. And I didn't really know how to, for example, get into the process of academic publishing, especially since I expected that's something I would come into contact with a lot at university. So I'm so glad I did find this program because it was a great transition into learning how to write academically. And I came across it just by sort of simple research. I was really looking for a course that would sort of extend my love for physics as well as teach me something new.
Cool. So what was it about physics, or kind of is this something that you've been focusing on a lot at school, or just in your personal research or kind of areas of interest? What was it that drew you to physics and specifically astrophysics?
Yeah. So growing up, I'd always loved the sort of mathematical and STEM side of my classes, especially engineering. And then especially, for example, astronomy, I went to a space camp when I was younger, and that sort of piqued my interest. I've been in love with astronomy ever since. So the idea of astrophysics, I really love. And at school, we had a short lesson and sort of unit on astrophysics, but although I loved it, I felt that it was too short, and that's how I began my own independent research on topics of astrophysics, and that's how I'm here today.
Well, that's really wonderful. It's really cool when you have those things that you learn a little bit about and you think, tell me more. And then, if you can't get that within the classroom, it's very always inspiring, I think, when you have people that go and find that somewhere else and make that happen for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So then in terms of the project, I think you had kind of teaching to start with, and then you moved into doing your own sort of research and modeling. So maybe talk us a little bit through the process and what that was like for you in terms of the different sections that you went through on this journey.
Sure. So my program was about 13 weeks long through sort of spring to summer. And the first half of the course was on essentially theory. We had a mixture of lectures, which were sort of university level, to prepare us for which was sort of content of astrophysics, which was very challenging, but also was a great support to the research we'd be doing later on. And then the second half was the actual sort of report building and our own research. At the halfway mark, our mentor and TA helped us decide what kind of project we wanted to create based on the content we had been taught. And then from there, it was sort of more independent one-on-one mentoring to help us with that project.
Cool. So then in the first part, you had more of the teaching base, and then you went into your own research. And what was the kind of focus of your research, or what have you been looking at specifically within your work?
Yeah. So since the course was on high density objects, my research itself was actually while we were being taught this content, we also learned how to, and we were practicing doing mathematical sort of like matrices, and we started to derive these equations, like for example, the Lorentz equation, which is a common equation for physics. And then what I decided to do was to create a program that derived this equation itself, and then created a sort of visual interpretation of how a particle would behave, for example. And that I coded with Python. And I'm more of a visual learner myself. So while the result I found from the mathematical sort of deriving was great, I found that the visual graphs were a lot more appealing to my learning.
Hmm. And was this, in terms of the coding, was this something that you had prior experience in, or was learning the coding and modeling side of things a part of the course as well for you?
I have been coding since I was about 9, so I definitely love to code. But however, the mathematical modeling was almost completely new to me, and that was something I had during the course I sort of taught myself a bit of, and I definitely the with the help of my TA, he was very helpful because he was also a coder, and the mathematical modeling, since I had no experience of it, he was really great in helping me out in that. However, my prior experience, I'm glad, sort of helped me do a more advanced project, but I had no experience with modeling or sort of even graphing of that kind. I'm more of an algorithmic programmer.
But that's really interesting then, if you were able to take your previous knowledge and then develop new skills as well and kind of merge the two together as part of your project. So both build on the foundation that you had within coding and then introduce this new element of mathematical modeling. Because were there any particular challenges that you faced along the way, or sort of particular moments where you found difficult points within your work?
I think that almost immediately the content of the course, since it was university level physics and I'm only I just started my third year of high school, was a bit challenging, especially since I had not experienced more astrophysics, and at that high level I sort of more just high school level physics. However, once I got the hang of it, it was definitely very almost engaging to work at that high level. So I'd say the content was probably the biggest shock to me. And then further on, when I was learning about how to publish and how to write first, then publish my report, that was a big learning curve, I think, especially learning how to show my findings in sort of an academic and a logical manner.
So we start with the first part of it, the learning and the teaching. How was it for you then, this experience of not only having these university lectures, but also then working with these university academics and having more of this one-on-one support?
Yeah. It was amazing. I think that personally, I was in a group session, so not only the one-on-one style sessions with later on, but also the fact that with my group, any other student could ask a question that I could have been thinking in the back of my head, or even one that I had not even thought to think of to ask. But all questions sort of helped the entire group immensely. So not only that group environment, but the teaching itself. My professors were amazing with how they showed the content to us, and especially the TA session afterward, the main lecture, where we could sort of ask whatever question we wanted, even if you were to say, I have no idea what the professor just said in that lecture, could you explain it? It was really helpful, especially since this university level is completely new to all of us.
Yeah, and I guess it's very helpful then as well when you have that group, and it's reassuring sometimes as well when you have a question in the back of your mind and someone else asks it and think, oh goodness, it wasn't just me that was thinking about that or that didn't quite understand the word that was used there.
Yeah.
Because then when it came, I guess, to the other side of things, to the writing and presenting your findings, what do you think were the biggest pieces of learning that you would take away from that, or the biggest things that you've learned from that process, in terms of someone who hadn't had experience of doing this research and writing before?
Especially, I think apart from the actual sheer fact that I was learning how to write a report, the biggest learning curve I think I experienced and the biggest takeaway was especially how I learned how to format it academically. Initially, I think for example, in school, I could write for example, a politics or a history essay just fine because I was used to the structure, but I had never been expected to write, for example, a physics paper. Or I'd written physics articles in school before, but never in the academic format, including some high-level language, but also write it in a way that made sense to most people who were to read it. So I'd say not only the formatting, but the vocabulary to make sure that you're being very specific with your language, especially since physics can have a lot of complicated terms in it, but to also phrase it in a very simple and easy to understand way, I think was the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, as I say, it's a skill that then kind of stays with you, but although it is tricky to learn at first. So
Yeah,
how did
exactly.
you go about that? I mean, was, I guess, advice and help from your TAs and professors, but then did you also find yourself reading other physics papers as you were doing the research?
Definitely. I think it was a combination of not only when I was preparing for my paper, I got into a cycle of reading sort of these different research papers that were related almost daily. And I think the idea of reading these papers really allows the language to get into your mind, and then you sort of start to mimic it. But when I was writing the report, my professors and TA were very helpful, going back, sort of sending the report back and forth to me to sort of tweak small things and to change the formatting and my language. But also I found that previously at school, I did lie of it. I had written almost academically for physics beforehand, but never in to the standard of university. So I think that while I found myself resonating with previous times I had, for example, written a physics article for my school newspaper, I think that I could almost like feel myself evolving in my language, especially since I could compare it to my earlier works. But my professors and TA were extremely helpful with helping me write this.
That must be then very rewarding as well for you to see that evolution and that progress as your
Yeah.
language and your academic writing develops. And then also, I guess you're writing for two different audiences in terms of the people that would be reading your school paper and the, scientists or physicists that might be reading then your research paper, and how you communicate with both so that you can be understood by your audience, but then also, convey these very complex ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then in terms of your actual findings and the results of your research, was there anything that particularly struck you within these visuals that you were creating?
I think that, again, the main thing that surprised me was how much of a difference the visual sort of confirmation of my results had on me versus just the mathematical ones. Because I was used to of course, when you do mathematical modeling on paper, you have parabolas and curves, and that you think is visual. But for example, an output of my code would be a 3D graph, and then there would be, for example, a straight line as an example of a particle acceleration in an electric field, for example. And that is a physical, it's almost like a 3D model, those videos you'll see on YouTube of a particle moving. And the fact that you can create that from a physical equation that you yourself encoded really does change the way that I will now sort of view specific models, especially since at the start of the course, the exact same equation was almost Latin or Greek to me. It made no sense. Yeah.
And definitely, you said yourself at the start that you're more of a visual learner, and so being able to bring those equations not only to a point where you are understanding them and using them yourself, but then to where you're able to encode them and then visualize them. And I imagine you wouldn't be alone as a visual learner and being someone who really appreciates and can work much better with a visual representation of what these particles could look like within certain fields. Because was there anything then particularly that surprised you or was interesting to you when you were looking at the movement of these particles between the different fields that you were looking at?
I think what surprised me most was actually the similarities between the particle movements. I found that the code that I was writing for each electric field, well, actually not the code, the inputs for the code, for example, the different fields, for example, uniform magnetic field versus if there's a slight altercation. I thought that the values that I were inputting would incur a much greater result in my results, but I actually found that they were quite similar and that I had to almost increase the scale of my inputted values. So I found that quite interesting because I thought that, for example, for a particle, a small change would change the acceleration or the movement of a particle so greatly, but actually it's not the case. I think that's one thing that I also was a bit shocked to learn.
Yeah, so kind of you think there'd be more of a larger ripple effect.
Exactly.
But actually when there's not so much difference, it can be interesting. Yeah, sometimes the small is as interesting as the big. Because yeah, then as this was your first research experience, I mean, overall, how did you find it? And would you then consider going on and doing further research in the future?
Yes, so I actually consider myself a bit lucky that I found this course as a second year high school student, because that means I almost did this course a bit earlier than most. And I'm especially lucky that I did this course early on because not only do I now have almost like a year of extra time to practice academic writing, especially in preparation for university, but I can now, if I am very likely, because this course has been amazing, if I now have the extra sort of summer and the time to do another research project or paper in the future. And I think that either with assistance or not, the skills that I gained from this course with the academic writing, but I think also the researching was instrumental because now let's say I don't want to do a paper on astrophysics anymore, or at least not high density objects. If I want to go into another field, I can use those same skills and apply them to adapt myself into different fields. I think that was the main takeaway. And the fact that I did this course a year earlier than most is definitely been very helpful.
Yes, I guess then you've got time to build on, develop these skills. And I love what you were saying about them being, very transferable. Just this practice of how do you go about a research project? You have an idea of a field that you're interested in, but how do you kind of select that topic and build the foundational knowledge that you need in order to come up with a question and tackle it as a research activity, and then write up those results in an academic way.
Yeah.
It's that could work if you were interested in engineering or have been primarily looking at engineering. So I don't know whether you would ever think of combining either your astronomical knowledge with your engineering, or just engineering in itself
Yeah.
within the future. I
Yeah,
don't
what
know
I
whether
love
you
about
have. Oh, sorry, I can
yeah.
go.
Yeah, I was going to say what I love about STEM is that, or I guess any academic field, is how they are so unique in their own ways, and of course the applications. But the fact that you can create such a niche field by combining them is amazing. For example, if I were to go into aeronautical engineering, that involves physics, sort of aerospace, nautics, and engineering. And that's what I really love about these different academic fields, is that especially one thing I loved about the CCIR thing was that when I applied, there was a list of courses that you could apply to, and it covered such a wide range and sort of breadth of academic fields, but they're also so niche in their own specific way. For example, astrophysics, that's already a pretty niche topic, but the astrophysics of high density objects, I was almost shocked at how high level they already were, yet they managed to cover such a wide range. You'd think that they need like a million different topics to cover so many. So I think that's what was very unique about this.
And I guess definitely even within your project, you've had sort of an interdisciplinary approach in terms of combining both mathematical knowledge with knowledge of physics and astrophysics, and then also using coding and computer science skills within that to create the results of your project. Which kind of speaks well, as you said, in the future of being able to combine different areas of research, and the fact that a lot of the time an area of research is not one specific field in itself. So it's good to get experiences of different things, even if the astrophysics of high density objects is not an area that you want to stick with in the future.
Yeah.
Because then for you, what are your next steps now? Are you thinking of then applying to university, or what are your plans?
Yes, I definitely am planning on applying to university. I'm currently in my third year, so I'd be applying next fall. But I think that I would like to stay within the range of engineering, so astrophysics, but I'm also very passionate on sustainability and how you can sort of apply these scenarios to, for example, because global warming, climate change, and general, global health is a big topic and definitely needs the highest level of science to be solved. So I think that all these fields I am really passionate about, and I would love to, for example, do more research or to do a project on. So I think those are my next steps.
Sounds really amazing. And then you said yourself that in your second year of high school, so you have, it'll be next year that you're starting to think about university applications, and that you're very grateful for having done this project sort of a year earlier than normal. But then in terms of thinking about your overall project experience, were there anything that you would take away, not just in terms of academic things that you've learned, but in terms of personal growth or development that you feel you've had through this project?
I think almost a piece of growth I've had from this course that I haven't seen really talked about much is the actual growth from interacting with sort of like-minded peers. You wouldn't really expect to find a group of, even across the world, of four high school students who were interested in astrophysics and were willing to spend like 36 hours on it over a summer and to write their own paper. But I was lucky enough that I could be one of the students and that I could interact with other students who were so passionate and had such contrasting sort of upbringings and perspectives to mine. For example, when we would derive equations, and we all had different levels of previous schooling, and that sort of varied our levels of whether we could solve an equation. I think that this is almost a social element in sort of researching and learning about these things together. And I guess that's what makes me probably most excited for university, because that means I can have a chance to engage with 100 like-minded peers instead of just four. But this course has been a great insight into sort of university level physics, and I'm really excited about it.
That sounds great. And I can completely agree the idea of how, when you go and suddenly you come from you know, a place where you really don't have many people of your age or just many people in general interested in your specific field, and then suddenly you're able to have these conversations, you know, you're in a room with a lot of people that when you introduce a topic are interested in that, and that's really lovely. And it's great to be able to bounce ideas off one another. And I loved what you said earlier about that sort of collaborative element within the group and different people asking questions and benefiting from having others there within your learning as well.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, just very wonderful. And so final question for you then would be, given your overall experience within the CCIR, would this be a project that you would recommend to other people, other high schoolers thinking about research to take part in?
Yes, absolutely. I think that not only the breadth and depth that this course or any CCIR course would cover, and that almost any student can find a field that they're interested in or are likely to be interested in through this course, but also how engaging it is, I think I found the most interesting. I think that also it's a great learning step in general if you're planning on either just as a career for future careers or for university. These skills, as we both discussed, are very transferable. And the idea of academic writing, for example, I was lucky enough to sort of learn academic writing for reports in a STEM focused physics field, but I can easily transfer as much if I for biology or politics or history, especially the researching. So the researching and the academic writing, the skills will stay with you forever. So I would highly recommend it. And also the professors and the teaching they're very engaging, very supportive, and they were open to the thousands of questions we had for them.
Well, I'm sure for them it was a wonderful thing just to have a group of high schoolers really interested in their field and wanting to ask questions. I know, you know, as someone who's done some teaching in the past, the worst moment is when you look at the class and no one's got their hand up. The best moment is when you've got, you know, 20 hands up and everyone's interested and engaged in a topic. That's really good to hear. Well, thank you, Karma, so much for talking to me today. I've really enjoyed hearing about your project, and I wish you all the best for them, what's going to come next for you.
Thank you.